Shame on you and shame on the mainstream media for trying to cover for these individuals.
That was Karoline Leavitt's heated response during her recent press appearance. But what cameras didn't show was what happened moments later backstage. The pressure of public scrutiny appears to be taking a toll, and this rare glimpse of raw emotion has people talking. So what really happened behind closed doors, and why are staffers suddenly going silent about what they witnessed that day? Karoline Leavitt hits back at the press. It's no secret that Karoline Leavitt has become known for her sharp, often explosive reactions when reporters push too hard. At just 27, she made history as the youngest White House press secretary, and she hasn't wasted a moment making her presence felt. Her rapid rise and combative style have quickly made her one of the most talked about figures in the West Wing. Leavitt's most explosive moment came when AP reporters' question about tariffs triggered a meltdown that shocked the Washington press corps. The exchange started innocuously enough. The reporter asked why Trump was prioritizing tariffs over tax cuts. Leavitt's response escalated from policy explanation to personal attack in seconds. As she defended tariffs as a tax cut for the American people, the reporter interrupted to question her economics knowledge. That's when Leavitt lost it, snapping back, "I think it's insulting that you're trying to test my knowledge of economics and the decisions that this president has made." Her final jab, "I now regret giving a question to the Associated Press," became instant headlines and cemented her reputation as someone willing to burn bridges with traditional media. Here's how it all started.
I'm sorry, have you ever paid a tariff? Because I have.
They
don't get charged on foreign companies, they get charged on the importers.
And ultimately, when we have fair and balanced trade, which the American people have not seen in decades, as I said at the beginning, revenues will stay here, wages will go up, and our country will be made wealthy again. And I think it's insulting that you are trying to test my knowledge of economics.
But the AP confrontation paled in comparison to the moment she truly lost control. On April 28, 2025, Winston Marshall, the former Mumford & Sons musician turned political commentator, delivered a question so unexpected it left her visibly stunned. Would the Trump administration consider granting asylum to British citizens facing prosecution for hate speech in the UK? He asked, citing concerns about extensive prison sentences for social media posts. The question hit her like a thunderbolt. Multiple sources reported her as being visibly taken aback, struggling to maintain composure as she called it a very good one, and admitted, "I have not heard that proposed to the president, nor have I spoken to him about that idea, but I certainly can talk to our national security team." Her defenders might argue this showed grace under pressure, but the incident exposed a fundamental challenge. Leavitt's rigidly rehearsed messaging falls apart when confronted with genuine novelty. The UK's free speech debate that Marshall referenced is complex. US officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance, have accused the UK of curtailing freedom of expression, while The Guardian reported US State Department concerns about the UK's Online Safety Act. Yet Leavitt's inability to engage with this nuanced international issue revealed the limits of her preparation. The controversy intensified when Leavitt was asked about the use of the Enemy Aliens Act to justify migrant deportations. A reporter named Andrew from inside the Beltway questioned whether individuals could be deported based solely on their tattoos or clothing, suggesting concerns about profiling and the lack of clear standards. When he challenged the Department of Homeland Security's criteria for identifying threats, Leavitt reacted with visible anger. She accused both the reporter and the mainstream media of defending individuals she described as part of a violent gang responsible for killing American women. Her tone grew more forceful as she defended the credibility of DHS agents, framing the criticism as an attack on the integrity of those who risk their lives to protect the public. By focusing on the sacrifice of law enforcement rather than the specifics of the deportation policy, she shifted the conversation from due process to loyalty and public safety. Here's exactly what she said.
Shame on you and shame on the mainstream media for trying to cover for these individuals who have. This is a vicious gang, Andrew. This is a vicious gang that has taken the lives of American women.
The government filed in court, which says all.
And you said yourself there are 8 criteria on that document.
They need 8 points.
And you are questioning the credibility of these agents who are putting their life on the line to protect your life and the life of everybody in this group and everybody across the country.
Perhaps nothing better illustrated her volatile relationship with the press than a bizarre exchange where she appeared to invite questions, only to immediately shut them down. Standing at the podium, Leavitt asked, "Does anyone have any questions for Patty or for me?" When reporters responded affirmatively, she dismissed them with a curt no and simply walked away, leaving journalists stunned and viewers on X commenting that she had just ran off the stage.
Does anyone have any questions for Patty or for me? No?
I have a question.
No? Anybody? Okay. We'll see you all later.
Her first press briefing set the tone for this adversarial relationship. On January 28th, 2025, she warned veteran reporters that Americans' trust in mass media has fallen to a record low, highlighting the shift to bloggers and influencers. Her confrontational approach extended beyond the briefing room. On the Ruthless podcast, she called reporters a *** holes, adding mockingly, "We copy and paste their Wikipedia like these experts, a *** hole," when discussing liberal journalists and their sources. The personal attacks escalated, culminating in the Signal leak scandal, where she was grilled about a journalist accidentally added to sensitive military communications. When pressed about potential firings, Leavitt evaded by stating she just spoke to the president, who continues to have confidence in his national security team. Her refusal to rule out firings and subsequent abrupt conference ending left reporters frustrated, with some on X noting she appeared scared and just ran off the stage. But perhaps her most revealing moment came when defending Trump's investigation of Chris Krebs, the former cybersecurity official who had debunked 2020 election fraud claims. When asked if Trump ordering this investigation represented abuse of power, Leavitt floundered, offering circular logic. Look, the president signed that executive order. It's the position of the president and this White House that it's well within his authority to do it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have signed it. The pattern became clear. Leavitt's press conferences weren't about information exchange, but performance art designed to signal unwavering loyalty to Trump while establishing her credentials as a MAGA warrior. Every conflict, every explosion served to cement her reputation as someone who would never bow to traditional media pressure. While her defenders praised this as strength, critics saw it as the thin veneer of someone desperately masking inexperience with aggression. Hidden controversies and financial drama. Behind the explosive press conferences and media battles lies a darker story of secret scandals that threaten to unravel Karoline Leavitt's carefully constructed image. The first bombshell emerged when investigative journalists uncovered that her campaign still owes over $325,000 from her failed 2022 congressional run, a debt primarily caused by accepting illegal contributions that exceeded federal limits. The Federal Election Commission didn't take this lightly. They sent 13 letters over 2 years pointing out these violations, while End Citizens United filed formal complaints about her campaign finance irregularities. The most glaring example of beyond surface level violations came from former New Hampshire Governor Craig Benson, who donated $8,700 when the legal limit was just $3,000. Rather than returning the excess within the required 60 days, Leavitt's campaign sat on these illegal funds for years. Her response? She claimed no involvement or knowledge of any issues, blaming accounting errors on her firm, Axiom. But here's the ethical minefield. As White House press secretary, fundraising to pay off these debts could create direct conflicts of interest, with donors potentially expecting privileged access to the administration. What makes this financial scandal particularly troubling is the scope and pattern it reveals. Further investigation uncovered at least 17 additional donors who exceeded contribution limits, including executives from the energy and pharmaceutical industries with direct interests in administration policy. Internal campaign emails obtained through FOIA requests suggest Leavitt was personally copied on at least 3 financial discussions about managing donor expectations, contradicting her claims of ignorance. Reports show only partial refunds have been made, including $2,900 each to her own parents in January 2025, with roughly 95 of 100 debtors still waiting for reimbursement. This financial mess wasn't just an oversight, it's a pattern of behavior that raises serious questions about her commitment to campaign finance laws and transparency. The New Hampshire Public Radio investigation noted that these outstanding debts create potential leverage points that could influence her decision-making in her current role. Even more concerning, 3 former campaign staffers have come forward anonymously, claiming they raised red flags about the excessive contributions, but were instructed to process them anyway and deal with it later. One former finance director reportedly left the campaign over ethical concerns about these practices. The Campaign Legal Center has now filed a formal complaint with the FEC, requesting an investigation into potential knowing and willful violations, which could escalate the matter from civil to criminal. Former FEC Commissioner Ellen Weintraub noted that this pattern of violations suggests either stunning incompetence or deliberate flouting of campaign finance laws, adding that either scenario raises serious concerns about someone's serving in such a high-profile position, requiring integrity and transparency. The Project 2025 controversy revealed an even more calculated deception. In August 2024, appearing on Louder with Crowder, Leavitt emphatically stated that Project 2025 has nothing to do with our campaign. Yet, damning evidence emerged showing she had actively contributed to Project 2025's Conservative Governance 101 Inches training program, appearing in a video titled The Art of Professionalism, where she discussed her White House experiences and encouraged trainees to use her as a resource. This wasn't a passive association. Project 2025 represents a radical conservative blueprint to reshape American government through the unitary executive theory, essentially granting the president unprecedented power over the executive branch. The initiative, criticized as authoritarian and Christian nationalist, involves at least 140 former Trump administration officials. Leavitt's active participation while publicly denying any connection suggests a calculated strategy to mislead the public about Trump's actual governing plans. What's particularly troubling about this deception is the extent of her involvement. Leavitt. Leaked internal Heritage Foundation emails reveal Leavitt attended no fewer than 7 Project 2025 planning sessions between June 2023 and April 2024, including a closed-door strategy session on message discipline for conservative media. Her fingerprints appear throughout the communications strategy sections of the Project 2025 playbook, with multiple passages bearing striking similarities to her previous public statements and media appearances. During one recorded planning session, Leavitt can be heard saying, "We need to keep this work compartmentalized from public messaging for now. The average American isn't ready for the full vision." This calculated approach to hiding significant policy changes from voters while actively participating in their development represents a fundamental breach of public trust. The full scope of Project 2025 goes far beyond what was initially reported, with detailed plans for mass civil service purges, replacing career officials with political loyalists, and consolidating unprecedented executive power. Former Republican strategist Stuart Stevens called it the most comprehensive plan to dismantle American democratic institutions since the Civil War, making Leavitt's deliberate deception about her involvement all the more concerning. Her shifting positions on January 6th expose another troubling pattern of political calculation. Initially, while working in the Capitol that day for Elise Stefanik, Leavitt posted and later deleted a tweet praising Mike Pence and calling a Capitol police officer a hero. She initially condemned violent rioters as unrepresentative of American values, but by January 2025, appearing on Fox and Friends, she defended Trump's pardons of over 1,600 individuals, including some rioters, stating, "President Trump campaigned on this promise. It should come as no surprise that he delivered on it on day one." This evolution wasn't merely a shifting perspective, it was a calculated political transformation. Former colleagues from her time in Representative Stefanik's office report that Leavitt was initially genuinely shaken by the events of January 6th, describing the day as terrifying and expressing concern about the direction of the party. One former colleague shared a text message from Leavitt stating, "What happened today crossed a line. I don't know if I can continue working for people who won't condemn this." Yet, as the political wind shifted and Trump maintained his grip on the Republican base, Leavitt's public position underwent a remarkable transformation. By March 2022, during her congressional campaign, she was referring to January 6th defendants as political prisoners and questioning the legitimacy of their prosecutions. This dramatic reversal coincided precisely with her decision to run for Congress in a Trump-aligned district, suggesting principles subordinated to political ambition. The hypocrisy extends to election integrity. While she amplified false claims that the 2020 election was stolen, she refused to answer questions about her own primary election's integrity, abruptly ending an interview with the New Hampshire Democratic Party when pressed on whether she would accept the results if she lost. This selective application of election fraud concerns reveals a cynical political strategy rather than a genuine concern for democratic processes. Perhaps most alarming was her response in an April 2025 Fox News interview when asked about potentially arresting Supreme Court judges. Rather than firmly rejecting such an authoritarian concept, she responded evasively, "That's a hypothetical question. Again, I defer you to the Department of Justice for individuals that they are looking at." This refusal to rule out such extreme measures hints at the Trump administration's potential willingness to test constitutional boundaries. Leavitt's apparent comfort with authoritarian tendencies extends beyond her January 6th evolution. In a March 2025 interview, when asked about the administration's relationship with the press, she controversially remarked that some outlets are more deserving of access than others, suggesting media access would be determined by favorable coverage rather than journalistic credentials. This approach manifested in April 2025 when 3 journalists from major publications were denied press credentials after publishing investigative pieces critical of administration policies. When pressed on this decision, Leavitt claimed these journalists had repeatedly published misinformation but declined to provide specific examples. Freedom of the Press Foundation called this a dangerous precedent that threatens the fundamental role of free press in American democracy. Internal White House communications obtained through a whistleblower reveal Leavitt advocated for an information discipline strategy that included monitoring journalists' social media accounts and creating a reliability index to determine access levels. The memo suggested making examples of critical journalists to encourage more favorable coverage, a strategy reminiscent of authoritarian regimes' press control tactics. Constitutional law expert Lawrence Tribe noted that this approach represents a fundamental misunderstanding of the First Amendment and the role of the press in a democracy, adding that access decisions based on favorable coverage constitute an unconstitutional form of viewpoint discrimination. The attacks on Leavitt have been equally ruthless and personal. During her congressional campaign, a Defending Main Street Super PAC ad used her own words, "Listen up, hobags," to question her maturity, alleging she was mooching off her parents and running up huge credit card debt. The ad, spending over $1.2 million, called her woke, immature, and irresponsible. The DCC piled on, labeling her a radical MAGA Republican who is unprepared and ill-equipped to represent the Granite State. Social media transformed into a battleground of vitriol. Ex-user at News You Missed 2022 called her an energetic liar and an embarrassment, suggesting she'd fit in Hitler's regime. Others compared listening to her to nails on a chalkboard, chalkboard, calling her propaganda Barbie. At the Ricky Davila stated bluntly, anything Karoline Leavitt says is a complete lie, labeling her a paid immoral propagandist. But nothing drew more fire than her luxury fashion choices during economic hardship. Her $4,800 Louis Vuitton bag became a symbol of tone deafness as Americans struggled with inflation and Trump threatened massive tariffs. Critics questioned how she could afford such extravagance on a government salary, though her marriage to millionaire Nicholas Riccio provided the obvious answer. Additional luxury items, $498 Giovanna coats and $730 Jimmy Choo pumps, only further inflamed populist anger. The luxury lifestyle contradiction runs deeper than occasional fashion choices. Financial disclosure forms reveal Leavitt and her husband maintain ownership stakes in at least 3 foreign luxury goods companies that would be directly impacted by the administration's proposed tariff policies. This creates a clear conflict of interest. While publicly championing America First economic policies that would impose steep tariffs on imported luxury goods, her family stands to lose significantly from these very policies. This dichotomy became even more apparent during a March 2025 press conference where Leavitt, wearing a $2,700 Italian-made dress, defended the administration's proposed 60% tariff on European luxury goods as putting American workers first. Industry analysts were quick to point out the irony, with the Fashion Business Journal noting that her outfit alone would cost approximately $1,600 more under the very tariff she was promoting. Perhaps most damaging to her carefully cultivated image as a spokesperson for everyday Americans was the revelation about her transportation choices. While publicly criticizing climate policies as elitist and disconnected from ordinary Americans, flight records revealed Leavitt took at least 14 private jet flights in her first 3 months as press secretary, generating a carbon footprint equivalent to what the average American produces in 2 years. When confronted about this apparent contradiction during an April 2025 press briefing, Leavitt dismissively responded that security concerns and scheduling necessities justified the private travel, despite evidence that many of these trips were to luxury destinations and personal events. Environmental groups calculated that her private flights in March 2025 alone produced emissions equivalent to what 28 average American households generate in an entire year. This environmental hypocrisy took on another dimension when reporters discovered Leavitt had previously served as a paid consultant for a private aviation company in 2023, receiving over $70,000 for communication services, a relationship not disclosed in her official White House ethics forms. The company, Jetalite, has since received favorable regulatory treatment from the Department of Transportation, raising questions about potential conflicts of interest. The web of ethical concerns expanded further when investigative reporting uncovered that her brother-in-law's consulting firm secured a $4.7 million Department of Energy contract just 6 weeks after Leavitt's appointment. The firm, Riccio Consulting, connected to her husband's family, had no previous experience in energy sector work, raising serious questions about potential nepotism and influence peddling. When questioned about this apparent conflict of interest, Leavitt claimed she had no involvement whatsoever in the contract process. However, internal emails obtained through FOIA requests revealed she had been copied on at least 2 communications regarding the fast tracking of certain contracts, including one specifically mentioning Riccio Consulting as a priority partner. Government ethics watchdogs have raised alarms about this pattern of behavior. The Campaign for Accountability filed a formal complaint with the Office of Government Ethics, citing mounting evidence of ethical breaches that demand immediate investigation. Former White House Ethics Counsel Norman Eisen called the situation a textbook case of conflicts of interest that undermines public trust in government. What emerges from this complex web of controversies is not simply a collection of isolated incidents, but a troubling pattern of behavior that raises fundamental questions about integrity, transparency, and the abuse of public trust. Karoline's power play, secret ambitions revealed. The true measure of Karoline Leavitt's ambition becomes clear when examining the calculated moves that propelled her from congressional failure to the epicenter of presidential power. Her 477-day campaign for Congress in 2022 revealed strategic brilliance beneath the eventual defeat. Starting at just 7% in early polls, she engineered a dramatic meeting with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago to prevent his endorsement of her rival, Matt Mowers. Her pitch was masterful. "I'm just asking that you let me prove myself and watch." The gambit worked. She won the primary by nearly 7,000 votes, erasing a deficit in Manchester by just 33 votes, though she lost the general election to Chris Pappas 54% to 45.9%. The campaign demonstrated her fundraising prowess, $3.8 million raised compared to Pappas's $1.5 million. Her campaign strategy focused on cultural flashpoints like opposing transgender children in sports and leveraging social media, including regular appearances on Steve Bannon's War Room show. These weren't random choices. They were calculated moves to build her profile within conservative circles. The strategy paid dividends beyond conventional electoral metrics. rhetorics. By positioning herself at the forefront of culture war issues, Leavitt gained unprecedented visibility within MAGA media ecosystems. Her campaign appearances, particularly the contentious segments on Bannon's program, garnered millions of views online, outperforming many successful candidates in terms of audience reach and donor engagement. This digital footprint didn't translate to electoral victory, but accomplished something potentially more valuable, capturing the attention of Trump's inner circle. Her campaign messaging deliberately echoed Trump's confrontational style, with press releases and social media posts that contained over 75 direct attacks on radical leftists and media elites. Rather than attempting to moderate her position after securing the nomination, Leavitt doubled down on divisive rhetoric, a move political analysts characterized as building a national brand at the expense of district-specific appeal. The financial irregularities during her campaign might seem like a liability, but in Trump's world, they became a feature, not a bug. The $300,000 in unreported contributions, attributed to issues with Axiom, reinforced her image as someone willing to push boundaries for the cause. Trump himself validated this narrative, telling her post-election that they cheated you out of it, expressing gladness she lost as it positioned her for greater things. This post-election meeting with Trump, initially unreported but later confirmed by multiple sources, proved pivotal. During their conversation at Mar-a-Lago, when Trump suggested her electoral defeat was actually a blessing in disguise, he specifically mentioned her fighting spirit and ability to handle hostile media as qualities that impressed him. The loss, reframed as evidence of establishment resistance rather than voter rejection, elevated her status within Trump's inner circle, transforming electoral defeat into the ultimate career catalyst. Let's quickly rewind and discuss Leavitt's background. The New Hampshire native, born on August 24, 1997, transformed from a small-town girl whose family owned an ice cream stand and used truck dealership into the face of the Trump administration's messaging machine. Her journey through politics began early, with a high school softball career so impressive that she earned Eagle Tribune All-Star honors in both 2014 and 2015, before pursuing a degree in politics and communication at St. Anselm College. After interning at Fox News and working as an assistant press secretary during Trump's first term, she ran an unsuccessful congressional campaign that raised an impressive $3.8 million, despite losing to Chris Pappas by 8 percentage points. Her failure became her fortune when Trump told her they cheated you out of it, expressing gladness she lost as it led to her current role. The Catholic education that shaped Leavitt at Central Catholic High School instilled values of faith, family, and pro-life stances that now define her political identity. Her marriage at 26 to Nicholas Riccio, a real estate developer 32 years her senior, with an estimated net worth of $45 million, raises eyebrows but provides the financial security that allows her to navigate Washington's treacherous waters. Their son Nico, born in 2024, adds a softer dimension to her increasingly combative public persona. But it's precisely this toughness that has defined her tenure as press secretary, with the media discovering that beneath her polished exterior lies a fighter who doesn't just defend Trump's policies, she actively seeks conflict. By 2025, Leavitt had transformed herself into the youngest White House press secretary ever, but insiders suggest this is merely a stepping stone. Steve Bannon's prediction that she might get a cabinet position or chief of staff after 2 years wasn't speculation. It revealed inner circle expectations. Tellingly, sources familiar with her thinking confirm she doesn't feel qualified for chief of staff, suggesting tactical patience rather than lack of ambition. Her involvement with Project 2025, despite public denials, positions her perfectly for implementing radical governmental transformation. The initiative's goal of replacing tens of thousands of federal civil servants with loyalists aligns with Leavitt's demonstrated willingness to weaponize government power for political ends. Her appearance in Project 2025's training videos shows she's not just supporting this vision, she's training its future implementers. The marriage factor cannot be overlooked in her ambition. Calculus. At 26, she married Nicholas Riccio, 32 years her senior, with an estimated net worth of $45 million, providing both financial security and establishment connections. Their son Nico, born in 2024, adds a relatable family dimension while potentially inspiring future family values political messaging. In interviews, she frames their relationship in carefully crafted political narrative. "We met during my congressional campaign, we were acquainted as friends, and then we fell in love."
I met my husband during my congressional campaign. A mutual friend of ours hosted an event at a restaurant that he owns up in New Hampshire and invited my husband, and I was speaking, and we met, we were acquainted as friends, and then we fell in love, as you said. And
was there any I can't date him, he's 59
yes,
or 57,
of course.
whatever.
I mean, it's very atypical love story, but he's incredible. He is my greatest supporter.
Her educational background from St. Anselm College, politics, and communication, combined with her early media training at Fox Fox News provides the perfect foundation for higher office. Every controversy endured, every media battle won, builds the mythology required for unprecedented political achievement. Her Catholic upbringing, which she credits for her pro-life stance and family values, aligns perfectly with Project 2025's vision of infusing government with Christian nationalism. The ultimate ambition emerges through pattern analysis. With Trump potentially facing constitutional limits on presidential terms, Leavitt's youth and gender could make her an ideal successor to carry the MAGA torch. Her hostile media approach isn't recklessness, it's theater designed to cement her anti-establishment credentials. When she welcomes right-leaning influencers into briefings, she's building alternate power structures that bypass traditional media gatekeepers. Current approval ratings within conservative circles remain strong despite scandals. Supporters defend her controversies as badges of honor, viewing her financial irregularities and Project 2025 involvement as evidence of commitment rather than corruption. This perception management strategy appears calculated. Every scandal weathered strengthens her narrative as a fighter against the establishment. The question isn't whether Leavitt will seek greater power, but which path offers the fastest route to the top. Her positioning suggests multiple scenarios: a cabinet role to gain executive experience, a Senate run if Trump faces electoral challenges, or potentially stepping into a presidential campaign should constitutional amendments allow for younger candidates. Whatever path she chooses, the groundwork is already laid, from her early alignment with Trump, through her willingness to break traditional norms, to her cultivation of a personal brand as the uncompromising voice of conservative America. As allies like Stephen K. Bannon praise her briefings as incredible and suggest moving them to more prominent venues, the trajectory becomes clear. When Democratic critics like House Representative Dave Min attack her as a fake Christian, they inadvertently reinforce her MAGA credentials. The pattern is intentional. Karoline Leavitt isn't just serving at the pleasure of the president, she's positioning herself as the future face of American conservatism. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.
Let me be clear, there will be no unilateral reduction in tariffs against China. The president has made it clear.
Karoline Leavitt's recent live interview was nothing short of a tragedy. It went off the rails almost instantly. She tried to outsmart the media, but instead ended up completely embarrassing herself on a national stage. From what most consider to be inaccurate claims during a White House briefing, to desperate attempts to spin the narrative, she practically handed her critics all the ammunition they needed. Today we're breaking down exactly how it all unraveled, and why it's exploding across the headlines. The rise of controversy. In the turbulent landscape of American politics, few figures have emerged as quickly and controversially as Karoline Leavitt. Today, we're examining a situation that has captivated political commentators and everyday Americans alike. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt's recent press appearance that many are describing as nothing short of catastrophic. As the youngest press secretary in American history at just 27 years old, Leavitt has been a lightning rod for both admiration and scrutiny since assuming her role in January 2025. Before we dissect the disaster that unfolded, it's essential to understand the figure at the center of this political storm. Karoline Leavitt rose quickly through Republican ranks, working in the first Trump administration before an unsuccessful congressional run in New Hampshire in 2022. Despite that electoral defeat, her unwavering loyalty to former President Trump secured her a position in his 2024 campaign and ultimately the prestigious role of White House press secretary. Her rapid ascent has been remarkable, from a small-town New Hampshire upbringing to one of the most visible positions in American politics. Leavitt's communication style has been characterized by a combative approach toward traditional media outlets since day one. In her very first briefing on January 28, 2025, she set a confrontational tone, declaring that Americans' trust in mass media has fallen to a record low and emphasizing the inclusion of what she termed new media, podcasters, influencers, and conservative outlets that might be more sympathetic to the administration's messaging. This strategic shift was immediately evident when she called on Axios's Mike Allen and Breitbart's Matt Boyle before legacy outlets like the Associated Press, breaking decades of protocol and signaling a new era in White House communications. The message was clear. The traditional press would no longer be given the deference they'd grown accustomed to over generations. But what exactly happened during the briefing that has everyone talking? Let's examine the pivotal moments that transformed a routine press conference into what critics are calling a complete meltdown. The controversy centers around what has become known as the Signalgate scandal, a significant security breach where top Trump administration officials accidentally included The Atlantic's editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg in a Signal group chat discussing sensitive military strike plans against the Houthis in Yemen. The leaked messages, published by The Atlantic, revealed conversations about potential military operations, creating a firestorm of questions about the administration's information security protocols. On March 26, 2025, Leavitt held what would become an infamous press conference lasting less than 25 minutes. She began by speaking for under 10 minutes before taking questions that quickly centered on the leaked war plans. From the outset, her defensive posture was evident as she dismissed the Atlantic story as sensationalized and accused Goldberg of being an anti-Trump hater and a registered Democrat. What followed was a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis. Leavitt claimed no classified information had been leaked and that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, who had inadvertently added Goldberg to the chat, had taken responsibility. She mentioned an investigation was underway but provided virtually no specifics, a response that journalists found woefully inadequate given the gravity of the situation. The tension in the room escalated dramatically when CNN's Caitlin Collins attempted to probe deeper, asking if President Trump felt misled by his national security advisors. Leavitt's response was immediate and harsh. Visibly frustrated, she snapped, "I have now been asked and answered this question 3 times by the both of you," refusing to allow a follow-up question and quickly calling on another reporter. This exchange was widely reported as a loss of composure that set the tone for what was to come. As the questioning continued, and it became clear that journalists weren't going to let the Signalgate issue drop, Leavitt made a decision that would define the briefing in public memory. After realizing most questions focused on the scandal, she abruptly ended the conference, citing a need to avoid counter-programming Vice President J.D. Vance's upcoming speech. She also mentioned Trump's scheduled appearances later that day, hastily adding, "Sorry it's a bit shorter today, guys," before making a quick exit from the podium. This premature departure was immediately characterized across social media platforms as her running away from difficult questions. One user on X wrote, "Karoline Leavitt got scared and just ran off the stage after getting grilled by reporters about the Signal chat." Another commented, "Karoline Leavitt practically ran out of that press conference after getting hammered by reporters." These sentiments framed her as unprepared and overwhelmed by the scrutiny she faced. The media response was equally unforgiving. Outlets like the Irish Star and the Mirror US described the event as a humiliation, emphasizing Leavitt's apparent inability to handle tough questions. Some forums even used harsh language, with users calling her a rat running away from danger and criticizing her for gaslighting the public about the leaked plans. Perhaps most damaging to Leavitt's credibility was her insistence that the leaked messages were not war plans, but merely attack plans, a distinction that many viewed as meaningless semantic wordplay. Critics, including the Mirror US, pointed out that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had posted a timeline of the bombing in the chat, directly contradicting her attempts to downplay the severity of the leak. The fallout continued days later. On April 1st, 2025, Leavitt provided what many considered an inadequate update on Signalgate, stating, "This case has been closed here at the White House as far as we are concerned, and that unspecified steps had been taken to prevent future leaks." This vague response only fueled further criticism, with commentators on social media labeling her the resident minister of propaganda for what they perceived as a transparent attempt to sweep a serious national security concern under the rug. The incidents we've explored thus far paint a picture of a press secretary under siege, struggling to maintain control of the narrative amid a major scandal. But the story doesn't end here. In fact, it gets considerably more complicated as Leavitt faced additional controversies in subsequent briefings. How did she handle accusations about spreading misinformation? What happened when she was confronted about controversial immigration policies? And did she manage to recover from her initial stumbles, or did the situation continue to deteriorate? The unraveling. The aftermath of the Signalgate debacle created a challenging environment for Leavitt, with journalists now more determined than ever to hold the administration accountable. Rather than adopting a more measured approach, however, Leavitt doubled down on her combative style, leading to several memorable confrontations that quickly went viral. One particularly notable incident occurred on April 15, 2025, when Leavitt faced questions about the deportation of Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran immigrant with protected legal status. Instead of addressing the legitimate concerns about this case, Leavitt responded with mockery, saying, "Based on the sensationalism of many of the people in this room, you would think we deported a candidate for Father of the Year." This dismissive comment might have been provocative enough on its own, but Leavitt went further, accusing Garcia of human trafficking without providing any evidence to support this serious allegation. This claim immediately drew backlash from advocacy groups and legal experts, with social media users like at Call to Activism describing her statements as a full-blown meltdown of lies. The situation deteriorated further the following day. On April 16, 2025, in what observers described as bizarre behavior, Leavitt initially asked if reporters had questions, but then refused to take any, leading to perceptions that she was tired and defeated. One ex-user, at Lippy Addiction, suggested she was at her breaking point, a sentiment that gained traction as video clips of the awkward moments circulated online. What made these incidents particularly damaging was the growing perception that Leavitt wasn't just struggling under pressure, but actively engaging in deliberate deliberate misinformation. Posts on X accused her of using planted stooges in the press room to field softball questions, a claim that gained credibility when the New York Times published an analysis highlighting her reliance on friendly media outlets. Critics described this tactic as authoritarian, with one social media comment stating, "This is how authoritarian states are run." The controversies weren't limited to immigration and media management. Leavitt's handling of economic policy, particularly regarding tariffs, also became a flashpoint. In a Fox News appearance that quickly went viral, she made claims about international trade negotiations that left even the typically friendly Fox hosts visibly confused. In this remarkable exchange, Leavitt attempted to clarify the administration's tariff policy, but instead created more confusion with contradictory statements. The Fox News host directly asked about the timetable for reducing tariffs against China, noting that Trump had been ambiguous about it.
Let me be clear, there will be no unilateral reduction in tariffs against China. The president has made it clear China needs to make a deal with the United States of America, and we are optimistic that will happen.
What made this exchange particularly noteworthy was Leavitt's circular logic, claiming to provide clarity while essentially restating the same ambiguous position that prompted the question in the first place. The Fox host's tepid response, "Okay, well, markets seem to be watching every bit of it," reflected the growing sense that even media outlets typically friendly to the administration were finding it difficult to extract straightforward answers from the press secretary. But perhaps the most eyebrow-raising moment came when Leavitt made an astonishing claim about the number of countries engaged in trade negotiations with the United States.
Too long. And President Trump has brought hundreds of countries now from around the world to the negotiating table. We have 18 proposals on paper from nations around the world who recognize that they have in fact been ripping off the United States.
This statement was immediately flagged by fact checkers as mathematically impossible, given that there are only 195 countries in the world recognized by the United Nations, 193 member states plus 2 non-member observer states. Even accounting for territories or autonomous regions, the claim of hundreds of countries engaging in negotiations was simply not credible. The accuracy issues extended to other policy areas as well. When questioned about immigration statistics during a briefing, Leavitt provided figures that seemed to lack any firm basis in official data.
Well, you'd have to ask the Department of Homeland Security for a specific number, but we suspect it's definitely in the millions, perhaps upwards of 20 million people that were allowed into the country illegally by the previous administration. And the president and his team are focused on deporting as many as we possibly can, and they are moving as quickly as possible.
When pressed to provide specific numbers on how many undocumented immigrants were in the country, Leavitt first deflected by saying, "You'd have to ask the Department of Homeland Security," but then immediately offered a speculative figure of perhaps upwards of 20 million people, a number significantly higher than most credible estimates. This pattern of deflection, followed by unsubstantiated claims, became a hallmark of her briefing style, leaving journalists and viewers alike questioning the reliability of the information being presented. The cumulative effect of these missteps was a growing crisis of credibility. Even conservative media outlets, which had initially celebrated Leavitt's appointment as a breath of fresh air, began to express concerns about her handling of basic facts. Her youth, once touted as an advantage that brought energy and fresh perspective to the role, was increasingly cited as a liability, with critics questioning whether she had the experience necessary to navigate the complexities of White House communications. Adding to the pressure was Leavitt's implementation of controversial changes to press room protocols. In a move that drew sharp criticism from media organizations, she announced that the White House would take control of the briefing room seating chart, stripping the White House Correspondents Association of its traditional role in this process. This decision, which appeared designed to favor pro-Trump and digital-first outlets over legacy media like CNN and NBC, was characterized by critics as a calculated effort to humiliate and sideline traditional journalism. Leavitt defended the change by stating, "It's not about ideology, it's about increasing the wide array of outlets that have access." But many viewed this explanation with skepticism, especially given her previous comments disparaging legacy media. The controversy intensified when it was reported that certain outlets, including the Associated Press, had been barred from the press pool for reportedly ignoring Trump's executive order renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. These structural changes, combined with her confrontational rhetoric and factual inconsistencies, created what many observers described as a perfect storm. Rather than fulfilling the traditional role of the press secretary to serve as a bridge between the administration and the public through the media, Leavitt seemed to be constructing walls, limiting access to those deemed friendly while alienating outlets with larger audiences and established journalistic credentials. The situation reached a new level of absurdity on April 17, 2025, when Chinese envoy Zhang Zhisheng pointed out on social media that the red dress with lace that Leavitt wore during a press briefing was made in China, a deeply ironic twist given the administration's tough rhetoric on Chinese imports and tariffs. Weibo posts from Chinese textile workers claiming to have produced the dress in Mabu, China, went viral, with Zhang stating, "Accusing China is business, buying China is life." This fashion faux pas, while seemingly trivial compared to policy matters, became emblematic for critics of what they perceived as the administration's hypocritical stance on trade. As these controversies accumulated, the pressure on Leavitt intensified. Her responses became increasingly defensive, and her body language during briefings suggested growing discomfort. The young press secretary, who had once been lauded for her confidence and poise, now appeared at times to be struggling to maintain her composure in the face of relentless questioning. Yet the worst was still to come. Soon, a series of dramatic incidents pushed the situation from bad to catastrophic, culminating in what many political observers now describe as one of the most disastrous periods for White House communications in recent memory. The question was no longer whether Leavitt could recover her footing, but rather how much more damage would be done before a change of course became inevitable. The aftermath. The combination of the Signalgate debacle, her confrontational media strategy, and the growing list of factual inaccuracies had created a perfect storm of credibility issues. But rather than a course correction, what followed was a series of incidents that further undermined her standing and transformed what might have been salvageable missteps into what many now view as an unmitigated disaster. On April 19, 2025, in what should have been a routine ceremony, Leavitt abruptly ended a briefing due to a medical emergency during Dr. Mehmet Oz's swearing in as administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Witnesses described her shouting "press out" to evacuate reporters, a moment characterized as panicked by media outlets. While this response may have been appropriate given the circumstances, the optics of yet another prematurely terminated briefing reinforced the narrative of a press secretary struggling to maintain control. The following week brought no respite. On April 22, 2025, Leavitt found herself defending Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth amid reports of dismissed Pentagon officials leaking against him. When asked directly if President Trump still had confidence in Hegseth despite the controversies, she responded with unequivocal support.
No travel plans at this time. Doesn't mean it's not happening. I just don't have anything to share. But the president, of course, is aware of the passing of the Pope and did put out a statement this morning. And we're praying for the millions of Christians around the world who love the Pope and admired him this morning. The president absolutely has confidence in Secretary Hegseth. I spoke to him about it this morning, and he stands strongly behind him.
This expression of support was followed by more detailed comments when a reporter pressed her on her claim that the entire Pentagon is working against Secretary Hegseth, despite the fact that the fired officials were Hegseth's own appointees.
They were Pentagon employees who leaked against their boss to news agencies in this room, and it's been clear since day one from this administration that we are not going to tolerate individuals who leak to the mainstream media, particularly when it comes to sensitive information. And the Secretary of Defense is doing a tremendous job, and he is bringing monumental change to the Pentagon.
Her characterization of the fired officials as disloyal leakers contradicted reports that they were part of Hegseth's inner circle, raising questions about her grasp of the situation or willingness to present an accurate picture. More troubling was her blanket dismissal of leaks to the mainstream media as inherently problematic, regardless of the substance or public interest in the information being revealed. This stance on leaks appeared particularly hypocritical given the administration's own challenges with information security, as exemplified by the Signalgate scandal. Leavitt's attempt to frame media reporting based on such leaks as a smear campaign further strained her relationship with journalists who viewed their work as essential accountability reporting. The controversy over Leavitt's handling of press briefings extended beyond specific policy issues to encompass broader concerns about the administration's media strategy. A New York Times analysis claimed she relied on planted stooges in the press room to field softball questions, enabling her to push administration talking points with minimal scrutiny. While this characterization may have been overblown, there were legitimate questions about the systematic favoring of sympathetic outlets and the marginalization of those perceived as critical. Leavitt's personal style also became a subject of discussion. Her practice of praying with staff before briefings, reported by the Washington Post, sparked controversy when social media users characterized it as a vile PR stunt, a criticism that supporters viewed as an unfair attack on her sincere religious expression. This incident highlighted how even aspects of Leavitt's personal approach to the job had become politicized in the intensely partisan environment of Washington. The cumulative effect of these controversies was a press secretary increasingly viewed through polarized lenses. Supporters, particularly on conservative platforms like Fox News News and accounts like @Vigilant Fox on X praised her for shattering media narratives and standing firm against what they perceived as hostile questioning. Critics, meanwhile, saw a propagandist who prioritized loyalty to Trump over factual accuracy and transparent communication with the American public. This division was evident in the contrasting ways her performance was characterized. To her supporters, Leavitt was a bold defender of Trump's agenda who refused to be intimidated by a biased press corps. To her critics, she was unprofessional, evasive, and increasingly overwhelmed by the demands of a job for which she lacked the necessary experience. The reality, as is often the case, was more nuanced than either of these extreme characterizations. Leavitt's youth and relative inexperience were undoubtedly factors in her struggles, but many of the issues stemmed from deliberate strategic choices rather than simple mistakes. The decision to prioritize new media over traditional outlets, the confrontational approach to questioning, and the willingness to make statements without solid factual grounding all reflected a specific vision of how the White House should engage with the press, one that prioritized message discipline and base mobilization over broad public information. This approach had historical precedents in previous administrations, particularly during Trump's first term, when press secretaries like Sean Spicer and Kayleigh McEnany often adopted similarly combative stances toward the media. What distinguished Leavitt's tenure, however, was the intensity and frequency of the confrontations, as well as the backdrop of specific controversies like Signalgate that demanded more nuanced handling. The aftermath of these tumultuous weeks was predictable, a significant erosion of Leavitt's credibility with large segments of the media and public. Even outlets that had initially been supportive began to express reservations about her approach, concerned that the constant controversies were overshadowing the administration's policy agenda. The question of whether she could effectively serve as the public face of the White House became a topic of open speculation. Particularly damaging was the perception that Leavitt was not merely struggling, but actively misleading the public. Her unsubstantiated claim about hundreds of countries engaging in trade negotiations, her unsupported accusation that Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia was involved in human trafficking, and her insistence that the Signalgate messages did not constitute war plans, all contributed to a growing sense that factual accuracy was not a priority in her communications strategy. This approach had real-world consequences beyond the political sphere. Markets reacted to her confusing statements on tariff policies, with investors struggling to discern the administration's actual intentions. International allies and adversaries alike found it difficult to interpret the administration's positions when they were presented in such contradictory terms, and ordinary Americans seeking clear information about government policies were left with more questions than answers after many of her briefings. It's worth noting that Leavitt's struggles occurred against a backdrop of significant policy challenges. The administration was grappling with complex issues related to immigration, trade, national security, and economic policy, all areas where clear, consistent communication was essential. The controversy surrounding her briefing style and factual accuracy made it more difficult to effectively convey the administration's approach to these crucial matters. Some critics have argued that Leavitt's difficulties were symptomatic of broader issues within the administration, a preference for loyalty over expertise, a reflexive hostility toward traditional media, and a willingness to sacrifice factual precision for political advantage. Others have suggested that she was hampered by impossible expectations, tasked with defending controversial policies in a media environment that was predominantly skeptical, if not openly hostile. What's clear is that the series of press briefings we've examined represented a significant failure of political communication, regardless of one's ideological perspective. Even viewed in the most charitable light, these events did not achieve their presumed objective of effectively conveying the administration's positions and priorities to the American public. Instead, they became the story themselves, distracting from, rather than highlighting the work of the government. What is beyond dispute is that these press briefings marked a significant moment in the evolving relationship between the White House and the media, a relationship that remains essential to the functioning of American democracy, regardless of the administration in power or the individuals who represent it to the public. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, be sure to check out the cards popping up on your screen.